Dear friends, we are very glad to welcome all of you on UJF platform today. It's my pleasure to introduce you, our special speaker, Dr. Ray Lutsky, a seasoned leader who knows how to make universities better, who has 20 years experience in higher education and a wealth of experience in digital audience strategy, social media marketing, enrollment outreach, and public relations. Currently, Ray is serving as a vice president in strategic partnership at Element 451, an AI-powered student engagement platform that helps institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interaction. Dr. Lutsky has extensive experience teaching at top US universities such as University of Southern California, New York University, and Cornell Tech. Ray has Ukrainian roots. He's a true supporter of our country, and we are sincerely grateful for his contribution to UJF. Today, we have a unique opportunity to ask questions in our Q&A chat to Ray, and after the lecture, the most interesting will be answered by our speaker. And now, my warmest welcome to you, Ray. Enjoy the lecture.
Thank you so much, Olga, for that very warm introduction, and good evening to all of you across Ukraine. It is my distinct honor to be here. I bring you greetings from the University of Southern California. I am here from Los Angeles, California, with you tonight. And as Olga said, I have a deep appreciation and respect for all of you, and my sympathies and heart goes out to all of you in the situation you're in right now. As she mentioned, my grandmother was actually born in a small town, Golubinsk, just outside of Oman. And I have a long history of connection, visited Ukraine twice about 10 years ago. And I'll talk about that briefly tonight when we get to a certain part of the presentation. But I'm really excited to bring to you my favorite topic that I've been teaching about for almost 10 years, user experience design, and the key important role of something called affordances in user experience design. So it's my hope that by the end of tonight's lecture, you not only have a greater appreciation for user experience design with technology, but you also understand the important topic of affordances and how that plays into how you can create better user experience design. So part one of tonight's session will be about user experience design and thinking specifically about humans and not necessarily about the technology. I want to start with the humans, and human-computer interaction, of course, begins with humans and how they are users and the experiences that they have and what that all means. So to create a baseline for all of us, let's begin there. So user experience design starts with the user, and you might be surprised to think about what a user really is. It's a human, a person who operates something. And in the case of tonight's lecture, we're talking about technology, but you can think of a user in many different contexts. A user is someone who plays an instrument. A user is someone who uses the utensils at a dinner table to consume their meal. A user, of course, is somebody who uses a laptop or a computer, uses a mobile device to achieve certain outcomes. But a user really refers to a person who operates any technology. A person who starts a campfire is a user. They're using the fire and they're operating that fire by creating it, managing it, and then hopefully putting it out when they're finished. So the word user can have a very broad definition when we think about it in creating experiences for them. And we can kind of move on from there and think about what an experience is. So you might think about, well, an experience is when I'm using an app or website or I'm playing some sort of game. But it again goes beyond that. An experience is an event or an occurrence that leaves an impression with someone. Not all experiences are good. Some experiences are quite dangerous and create a lot of stress, and you're all very familiar with what that's about. But then there are experiences that fill us with joy, like attending a concert or attending a sporting event. Here you see a baseball game here in the US. An experience can even be something as simple as enjoying tea and coffee with friends, with family. And that is not just about the drinking of the coffee. You're probably familiar with Starbucks, the massive, massive coffee shop chain started in Seattle, Washington. Individuals can buy a cup of coffee anywhere in the world. It doesn't have to be from Starbucks. And between us, I don't particularly care for their coffee, but they've created a experience in their stores, a place that people like to go, they like to work, they like to meet their friends there. So when you think about a store, you think about a restaurant, it isn't just about the products, what you can buy there, because in many cases you can buy those things anywhere. It's about what you feel when you enter that space. It's about the emotions that it creates. It's about the connections you have, and it's about how you view yourself. The same thing with driving a car. You can drive any car, but some folks choose to buy very expensive cars. Is there much difference between many expensive vehicles and less expensive vehicles? In many cases, there is no difference. It's how the user, the driver, feels about that experience that changes what that means for them. So, an experience can be a very broad way of looking at what we're talking about here. So, when we put these things together, it means how a person feels when they're using that product. And these products can be things in our daily lives. If we zero in on technology, which is where the focus is for this evening, we're talking about apps on your mobile device, on your computing devices. Of course, we're talking about websites. We're talking about any kind of software, whatever that might be, and really anything that a human may interact with or need, even the technology of a bicycle creates a user experience and a person feels a certain way. On a motorcycle, a person feels a very certain way and people view them differently. So that person feels something when they're using that app or that website or that software, in addition to just creating an outcome with a tool. But you can even think about the idea of unboxing. And you see this with many technologies, but a classic example is the iPhone. The idea that it comes in a beautiful white box when you get one from a store. It's very sleek, and you have to take the plastic off of that box, and the top slides off of it. And inside is this beautifully designed device sitting there on a little bed of cardboard. And it's got a little plastic film on it that you rip off. And it's like, this is a fresh, beautiful product made just for me. And that experience is used to create a premium, that is not just a phone, and that is something special. And it used to just be that the product was the special thing, but the experience around the product, it's everything. Even buying a computer years ago, people my age may remember purchasing a computer when it was something that came in a big box and you had to go to a store and you get this big box and how am I going to fit this box in the car? And I have to get it in there and I bring it home and I open it and it's got all these cables and things. Oh, it looks scary. And what do I do with this? And just setting the thing up was sometimes frustrating if you had never done it before because you had to plug in a monitor and the monitor was a giant thing. So the definition of a user experience is everything. It's not just the app, it's not just the website, it's everything the user encounters around that experience. And that's what we're really talking about when we say user experience. So, how do you design that? How do you go about taking a user experience and changing it in a way that will be better, that will be more valuable for your audience, for your users, for your customers? User experience designers, UXD professionals, create environments for these experiences. They do things that allow their users to either have an easier time using a product, feel better using that product, And when you focus on those things, it's something called human centered design. Human centered design. This means that we are framing everything we do in that design around what people need. We're getting feedback from those users. I often tell all of my students at NYU and University of Southern California, all feedback is a gift. All feedback you get from a user is a gift. Now, do we like all the gifts we ever receive in our lives? Maybe not. Sometimes you get a gift and you think, I don't want this thing, and you try to accept it graciously and say, oh, thank you very much for the gift, but you don't really want it. Maybe you put it on a shelf somewhere and you never look at it again. Maybe you give it to somebody else because you decide, well, I don't want this. Maybe this person will want it. Maybe you receive a gift, and even though you don't want it, you suddenly discover, wow, I don't know how I lived without this thing that was given to me. So even if you don't like the feedback you get from a user when they're talking about what they need in the design of a technology, you should look at all of it as a gift. Every time someone gives you feedback about the design you're creating, it's a gift. And we want to know about this because the people who are impacted by these designs have a lot to say. Product designers who don't talk to their customers, don't talk to their users, create beautifully designed things that nobody can use. We'll talk about that in a second. That's a very poor user experience, even if it made sense to the designer. We're designing solutions that solve real problems in real life context for real people. That is the goal of user experience design. And good design is good, and we'll talk about why that is, but poor design is all around us. And I'll show you on the screen now. This is from when I visited Dnipro 10 years ago, back when it was Dnipropetrovsk, and I was entering a shopping mall. And this shopping mall had these signs on the door as I entered. And as a foreigner, I had a hard time understanding what all of these mean. And there are no words here. And you can see some words at the bottom. But these symbols mean certain things. And I know what Wi Fi is, and I know what a dog is, and I know what a cigarette is. But what's the difference between a burger and a bottle and an ice cream cone? And what does that mean for how I'm supposed to use this space? So the design of the icons, what we call semiotics, we'll come back to that. The picture we get of things can have a big impact. It should be intuitive. When good design is at its best, it's intuitive. There's a well thought out solution that just feels natural. I sort of get it immediately without having to think too much about what I'm doing. That's why the best designed things, you take very little time to learn how to use them sometimes. You can probably think of some examples of things you've used that were either incredibly complicated and took a lot of work, or you had to go look on a video online, or you had to go read a manual in order to do the thing, versus an experience you had with a product, even a door, that it was very easy to get in and out of. Funny enough, doors are actually a big problem in design. There are many very badly designed doors. And there are doors that we think we're supposed to push open, and they're pull. This happens when I go to my barber. My barber has a door and it says pull and there's a handle. But because the door is old, it pushes in a little bit and it looks like you should just push the door in. And it works both ways, but that's the wrong way to open the door. And the barber always laughs when people come in and they don't know the way to open the door. But if you're there enough, you actually figure that out pretty quickly. We'll get back to the idea of doors in a second, but really want to focus in on what contributes to a positive user experience. Why do gamers sit and play games for hours and hours? Why are there professional gamers who sit in these massive competitions playing these games in special chairs with special headphones and special input devices? It's important to think of each piece of what they're doing in context. for the person and what they're trying to accomplish. Ease of use. What's the easiest way for me to do something? How can the user experience facilitate the easiest way for me to accomplish my goal with that app or that software or those devices? Can I find the information easily? That's called information architecture, IA. The idea of, do I need a lot of drop down menus and an infinite number of choices that could be very confusing? The idea of a menu on a website. Are there clear categories that I can look at and know what I'm looking for is in this category or this category? The architecture of that information. And of course, getting things done. Can I interact with it to accomplish my goal? And does it look pretty? I mentioned aesthetics, the idea of a visual and audio design that is very appealing. Sometimes folks create very great products that are very valuable and they look absolutely awful. They are kind of noisy or they're just bad looking and people lose credibility. They say, this doesn't look very good. Why would I use this? It looks like crap. And yet it's a very good product. So the visual and audio interaction of a user is also important to create that positive user experience. Going back to doors, you've all probably encountered a door in your lives that you didn't know how to open. And it should be pretty obvious when you go to open a door how you do that. It's a very simple technology. It's the way you enter or exit something. Poor user experience exists everywhere, and doors are a classic example. For example, the door on the right here, you can see it says pull, and there's a little thing there that looks like I put my hand in and I pull. That's pretty intuitive. And that kind of goes along with what a very famous expert that I'm going to talk about a lot tonight has said about doors. Donald Norman, who said, when I look at something, I should be able to discover what operations I can do. When discoverability, figuring out how to use it, is not there, well, you don't know how to use something. And that happens all the time. Beautifully designed doors that nobody can get in and out of. And Norman coined the phrase a Norman door. The idea of a Norman door, it refers to a term that Don Norman created, which is not just a door, it's a button, a menu, any digital object that doesn't tell you how to use it. For example, a door that didn't say push or pull on it. And maybe there's no handle there, it's just a plate. Do I push the door? Do I have to pull it? Where do I pull it from? And sometimes there are handles on doors where you're actually supposed to push. Is there a handle? The handle makes me think I should pull. This happens everywhere. And I'm sure you can think of doors in your own lives where this has happened to you. So, a bit about Donald Norman, because I'm going to come back to him a few times in tonight's lecture. Donald Norman is a design psychologist. He retired from the University of California in San Diego. He's my favorite user experience designer. He wrote a great book, which I highly recommend, called The Design of Everyday Things. The Design of Everyday Things. He was the first researcher at Apple to think about how the experience of using a computer contributed to how customers felt about that and whether they would buy it and what they would do with it. And he founded a great group called the Nielsen Norman Group that does a lot of this kind of consulting all over the world. Human-centered design, which we talked about, the idea of putting the human at the center, revolves around three key topics: desirability, feasibility, and viability. This is about building a deep empathy with the people you're designing for, generating tons of ideas, building a bunch of prototypes, and sharing what you've made with the people you've designed for to make sure they want it, it's desirable, to make sure it's feasible, can we make it happen, to make sure it's viable, does it actually meet within the goals of what we're trying to do as a business. The quote you see there is from a group called IDEO, which pretty much created the concept of design thinking. And this is also a way of doing design thinking, human-centered design. When you do user experience design for business, user experience can serve as the glue between a business and a customer. It bridges the gap between the technology and the business. The business and the user kind of need something to help them communicate or interact with each other. And that user experience design solution can be the way to glue the user to your business, to get the customer to use your business. Let's quickly go through those three concepts of desirability, feasibility, and viability. What do we mean by these? Desirability. Does this fill a need? Do we actually need this? Does it address something that adds value to the real world? And will it fit into people's lives? Will they actually have the ability to use this within the context of their life, or do they have to go do something special to figure out how to use this? A good example is the smartwatch. It fills a need because we can access everything we need from our devices very closely, and it fits into my life because I'm very used to looking at my watch to get information. And this allows me to do it in a way that's new, but it fits directly into what I do on a daily basis. You can imagine if you had to wear a belt instead of a watch to have a smart device, it'd be very difficult, very strange. People will be looking down at their belts all the time, and it just doesn't fit into people's lives. Also, wanting to know, does it appeal to them? We don't want this to be the only consideration, but we want to make sure people like it. I mean, you can imagine if a washing machine looked like a giant clunky thing that didn't fit well with your decor. You're designing your home, and all of a sudden there's this big thing that doesn't look very good. And many of you probably have washing machines like that that you'd look at and go, oh, why is this ugly thing here? Does it appeal to me? Will people want it? On the other hand, everybody wants something like this. What a joy to be able to use a washing machine to do all of my laundry. It makes my life so much easier. I don't have to wash things different ways or in the tub or in the sink. I can use this beautiful machine that does it all for me. And that's pretty special. So that's why it appeals to people if it looks good. But if people want it, it's even better. Feasibility is a place where we think about the future of it. Is the technology available to do this? Can I use technology that I already have? Do I have to create new technology to create my user experience solution? Sometimes it's better to be able to use the tools you already have. The other piece is it going to take too long? Sometimes a client wants you to do something, create an app or a website, design something, and it's going to take 6 months. You say, well, it's going to take me 8 months to be able to do this. And maybe they need it in 1 month. So what they need, that user experience you're creating, is not feasible. You can't extend the timeline to accommodate the design process. It has to meet the client's needs. And that's where feasibility comes in. So desirability, feasibility come together. Can you actually do it? Do you have the people who can actually make the product work? And sometimes you look at the folks you're working with, maybe you're designing an app, and you've got a team of very smart people you're working with. And you look around and say, okay, which one of you knows about artificial intelligence? And everyone kind of goes, well, I've used ChatGPT before, but I don't really know much about artificial intelligence. Maybe it's a time to think, well, maybe we don't have the right team to build an artificial intelligence product. We need to go back and look at that very closely and decide if this is feasible. The team has to be able to make it work in the long run for it to be feasible. And particularly within business, viability. So you might have something that's very desirable, people want it, very feasible, you can build it, but does it actually work with the goals of the business? Sometimes businesses need to know how something is going to increase their bottom line. We'll come back to that. Sometimes businesses need to understand what the impact is going to be on their long term business plan. They need to understand what resources might be required in the future to use that technology. So there's a lot of alignment required with the goals of a client, the goals of a business when you think about the viability of a design in user experience. It also comes down to the money. You could spend a lot of time and your team might be doing great things to build a product or experience that's beautiful and desirable, and the team can build it. It fits within the goals of the client, and it's going to cost $8 million. And they don't have $8 million. They maybe have, $20,000 or something to do the project. So you can't create that solution. It's not viable to build something so expensive. You have to work within that budget in the real world. And if it's outside your client's budget, you cannot design that experience. And then going back to the bottom line, what is the return on investment here? Maybe a business is willing to spend a lot of money to design a technology, work with you to put together a great user experience. What is that for? What is the value of that to the business? If I spend this money, does it mean my business gets more customers and I make more money? I have a high return on investment. That means that I'm going to get a lot of investment back for the money I'm putting in. If the investment far outweighs the benefit, a business is going to be very suspect. If a business is told, well, if you spend a little bit of money, you can create a new way to collect payments that'll be much easier for your customers. And if you do that, there will be an increase in sales. Well, there's a very high return on investment there. That's worth it. I will definitely spend the money to do that. So, viability, thinking about desirability, feasibility, and viability are the first steps in how we approach user experience design. But where do we go from there? Where is the next place we need to think about? Well, what is the problem we're actually trying to solve? Sometimes the first idea individuals have is the wrong idea because they haven't taken the time to think about what stakeholders in the business want, not just the people who work there who may have to use the product, not just the CEO, but also the customers and the potential customers. Have we talked to them? Have we listened to what they have to say and incorporated that into what we're working on? Meeting the customers who are going to need to use the product you're creating is critical because you need to understand their goals, their needs, and what they think and how they feel. Going back to the original idea of an experience, what is their experience today? How are you going to help address some of the problems? And the context is also important. You can do a lot of research for user experience by bringing people into a laboratory and having them, or into a business and having them look at things and go, oh, this is a very interesting piece of technology, and then get out in the real world and they can't use it because you were testing them in a very controlled environment. What about in their natural habitat? What about where they are in context? The bottom line here is you have to understand how to solve the problem, their goals, their needs from what they have to say, and make sure that not only should it be desirable, feasible, and viable, but it actually meets the needs of those target users in a way that will fit into their daily lives, just as we talked about. And there are some things to think about before you start. The first idea you have is wrong. Let me say that again. If there's a problem and you immediately come up with an idea, hundreds, maybe thousands of people have already come up with the idea, and it's probably not very good. You have to challenge your assumptions and think, what is it that I need to know to get this done? And the goals and objectives here are a mix of not just understanding the problem and the customer experiences, but it's also the team that you're working with, the culture of the business, the brand of the business, and the financial piece, which we talked about before. I'm going to come back to this in a little bit, but the idea of empathy, feeling for other people, understanding their emotions, empathizing with them is critical. The best problems are observed when you listen and work with the people who are experiencing a problem without judging them and thinking, well, that's stupid. They should know how to use this. Why don't they understand to do that? You have to think about them and be empathetic. I understand you have a problem here. I'm going to try and understand it. That context is so important. It's really incredible to think about someone having an experience in the physical world versus the virtual world. Those can be very different things. You're trying to catch a bus and pay to get on that bus versus having paid on your phone and just getting on and paying with that. Those are two very different experiences. And that context is important for anyone who's riding that bus. and interviewing customers, observing them, doing all kinds of research, putting surveys in front of them. Any data you can collect from those customers and those users is really going to help you to build a great user experience. The number one thing you should do to build a great user experience is get data from the customers and the users. Ask them lots of questions. And you may have to go back and ask more questions because the first questions you ask and the data you collect may not be the right ones. You may develop a prototype and then put it in front of users and discover there were all kinds of things we should have asked at the beginning of the design process. And you go back and you do it again because you are not designing something that goes in a straight line. User experience design is not a linear path, it's a circle. It's an iterative process. It goes on and on and on. We start with analysis. Let's get some data from the customers and users. Let's go map that out. Let's build a wireframe. What should the product look like? Let's draw a picture of it. Let's use some software to just build the outline. And then when we like that, let's build a prototype. What is a prototype for? It's for breaking. Some designers get very excited about a beautiful prototype they've designed. They think it's gorgeous, it's perfect. And then you put it in front of a user, and a user says, I don't know why you did this. And they give you all kinds of feedback. And you go, oh my goodness, we have to go back to the wireframing and redesign it. Or maybe we have to go all the way back to the analysis because we just got all the wrong information. We have to ask better questions. And even if you get it right, you build a prototype that everybody likes and they enjoy it. You then have to evaluate it once you've built the product. Are customers enjoying it? Are you getting all kinds of complaints? Is there confusion? And that's how we go about creating version 2. We evaluate and then we go right back into that analysis phase. Let's create the second version. Let's ask questions about the problems we know came up and then go ahead and build that next prototype and iterate over and over and over again. So user experience design is a circle, not a straight line. Bottom line here, designers must investigate how technology can create these experiences to solve real problems. And then once you've done that, the people have to actually be able to figure out how to use it. It has to be available to them, not just put in front of them. They have to understand what to do with it. How do I actually accomplish my goals using this product? And that's where we get into the second topic for tonight, which is affordances. Affordances create the relationship between the user and the technology. It's the way that you can help the user understand how to actually go about accomplishing their goals with this technology without having to go read the manual or do a lot of research on YouTube or on the internet to try and figure out how to do something. This is how we can create better user experiences. The number one way is building what are known as affordances. And going back to Donald Norman, who talks a lot about affordances in his book, The Design of Everyday Things, this is about human psychology. An affordance can act as a signifier. What does that mean? Signifiers are signs that show you something. So when there's a handle on a door, it's an affordance because it affords pulling. It affords opening the door. Sometimes objects have affordances that you wouldn't expect. So suppose I have a book and it's got pages in it, and I can look at the book and I can read the book, and these pages are important. That if I want to hold my place, I can turn down a page, or if I want to write something, maybe I can just go ahead and rip out a page, and I can write on this. And maybe there are other things I can do with this book. Maybe if it's raining, I can hold it over my head to protect me from the elements. Maybe if I'm on camera with you, I can hide behind the book. It doesn't afford the passage of light. Therefore, when I hold it in front of me, I'm kind of invisible. So many objects come with affordances you wouldn't expect. And I can tell just by looking at it what some of those affordances are. So the signifiers that signal to me what actions are possible with this book represent to me what I can do with this book. It even has a little bookmark that I can use. What's this for? It's to hold my place. So I can see that there are a lot of affordances with this book just by observing it. So that's kind of the first way to think about affordances. And understanding these affordances is really important because it's the first step in understanding usability. And usability means how someone can actually go about and accomplish their goals using the product or experience or app or website. And it's what makes it easy to use. If something is more usable, it's just easier to use, it's more intuitive. And it's really critical that sometimes the user is not really going to figure it out. They may look at this book and go, well, I can't open this book. Why can't I open it? Oh, there's this little elastic band here that's on top of it. So I can't open it. But I didn't know that band was there. And I can't do it. I'm having trouble opening it. And that may seem very silly as a silly example for tonight, but think about a person who just has never seen this before and they can't open the book. And you make, oh, that's so stupid. They should be able to open that. But empathy is important. When you're designing affordances, you want them to be intuitive. You want them to be easily understood. And you want to have empathy for the user. They don't know. Maybe they've never seen one before and they go, oh, wait a minute. It's elastic. I see this. So it comes off. And that's how I open it. So the affordances, it's kind of attached here, but I can move it like this. Therefore, I know I can take it off the book. We all make mistakes. Even very brilliant designers, professors make mistakes all the time. And having empathy for those mistakes when we do create affordances and user experience design is so important. What does a good affordance do? It gives the user agency. And it isn't necessarily just about the properties of the thing. I see a handle here. I see a key on this gym locker. So I understand that there's a lever. I can pull the lever. Those are the available actions with the lever. There's a key. I can turn the key and lock and unlock. So I know that that's the available things here. I can do with this door. But why do I know that? Well, there's actually a communication relationship going on here. The person that designed that handle put the handle there in a way that tells me, oh, that's a handle. I can pull on it. I might even be able to do this with it because there's a communication relationship. The designer somehow knew how to tell me by designing that there's an affordance for pulling. So we actually have a communication relationship. The designer is actually talking to me as the user. The same thing with the key. I can see that the key fits in there. Now, I know I can probably turn the key because it's a key, but the communication relationship is probably there's a hole and there's a hole that's shaped kind of like my key. And I put the key in there. It's not just that the object is a key, it means that there's a relationship that the designer has created that says, okay, user, if you want to open this door, there's a hole. And this key probably fits in the hole. So you've communicated to me that this probably goes in there because they're the same shape. This happens with electrical cords all the time. So an affordance can represent a communication relationship between the user and the designer. And when you can take advantage of these affordances because they're easily communicated, I know what to do just by looking at this. So I understand this is a handle and it's a lock, and I open the door and I close the door and I pull the lock. And now I know I've locked my locker. And it's as simple as that. When you create affordances that are easy to understand, I don't need instruction on how to use this. Now, this is a very simple example, but you can think about more complex examples where it's intuitive. The designer is telling me by the way it looks what I can do with it and making sure that I can do it the right way to accomplish my goals and have that agency, which means I've accomplished my goals. I can use the affordances in a way to accomplish my goals. So, how do we engender that agency? How do we help a user have that agency in a user experience? The goal of a designer is to create so many affordances in a device that the user does things that the designer never imagined. When they were designing the mobile device, an iPhone, just for, as an example, the original video of Steve Jobs coming out and describing it says that it's an iPod, a phone, and a web browser. Now you can imagine the thousands of other ways that you can use this device besides talking on the phone, listening to music, or browsing the internet. Everything from using it to open your door, turn on your lights, to at a concert, turning on the flashlight and holding it up so that Beyonce can see everybody holding your light up. These are all affordances created for this device. And there's such a rich set of them that the user goes off and does things with the device that the designer could never have imagined or communicated. And it empowers the user to create innovation through those affordances and do new things. I briefly touched on the idea of semiotics. And what semiotics means is beautiful kind of visual signs and understanding things. And as a Brazilian theorist named Clarice de Souza, who talked about the idea of affordances communicating with the user. She was one of the first ones that said this is a communication relationship. An affordance is a communication relationship between the user and the designer. And she talked about it as if there's a little helper pops up on the screen and tells you, well, here's what you can do. You're trying to do something here. Let me help you because the designer has told me how to do it. I can tell you, the user, how to do it. And there were a lot of these kind of very bad little characters that would appear in software and try to help you to do things. And they were never very good until now with the advent of ChatGPT 4 and generative AI. We now have an assistant that can tell us how to do anything. It can explain the affordances in any system. So that communication relationship between the designer and the user is now direct through an agent like an artificial intelligence system. You should know what to do when you look at an affordance. It is really critical that that designer's deputy communicates with the user. The designer themselves can't actually appear in your room and say, okay, here's how you're supposed to use the thing I've created. It's just not possible. We now have AI that can do that. We have videos online that can do that, but they have to be able to be understood. So designers can't always do it that directly. They have to do things in a way that express to the user what it is they're supposed to do. Sometimes that's cultural. Sometimes that's written language. Sometimes that's just the shape of an object. Sometimes when you look at a car, you can see all kinds of things in the car shaped very specific ways because you should know how to use them. You may be able to drive a car, but you've never been in this kind of car. So, how do I figure out where's the gear shift? Where's the clutch? How do I do these things? Okay, it should be over here. Can I figure it out? Ah, okay. The designer has put a little picture of a brake here. So this must be the brake and all kinds of things like that. They're communicated through more simple semiotic means to help you understand what to do. What all this does, what affordances do for the user, is help them bridge two big gaps, gulfs, they may be called. And Don Norman talks about these in his book, The Design of Everyday Things. There are two big gaps that a user has to cross the gulf of execution and the gulf of evaluation when they're trying to figure out something with a user experience. The gulf of execution is when they look, how do I do this? How do I go about building this thing or fixing this thing? How do I use this piece of software to do what I want to do? And I have certain intentions, but I don't know how to actually accomplish those. What can I actually do with this thing? And kind of bridging that gulf of execution is part of the designer's job. Can I create affordances that help the user understand the allowable actions that they can do? The gulf of evaluation goes a little beyond that and says, well, okay, what happened after I did it all? Did I actually accomplish my goal? Does what I'm seeing at the end actually look like what I intended? It allows me to interpret the physical state of the system. For example, sometimes there are devices that have an on and off button, and there's a little light next to them. Now, why is that light there? It shows me the state of the system. If I don't know how to turn something on and I just see a bunch of buttons, and then I finally find the right button and I push it and a little light comes on, that helps me bridge the gulf of evaluation. Did I successfully turn on the device? Yes. Why do I know? Because I got feedback. I get feedback. This little light turned on. Therefore, the system must be on. And that helps them bridge the gulf of evaluation. It's an affordance. So building in affordances that help the user figure out, how do I do what I need to do? What can I do? How do I bridge the gulf of execution? And then, did I actually do what I wanted to accomplish? Is there feedback that says, yes, congratulations, you've erased your hard drive? Or, yes, congratulations, you've finished the game? Or, yes, you've achieved a certain score on this exam? The gulf of evaluation, that's feedback to the user that they got somewhere with what they were trying to do. This also relates to the idea of conceptual models. Helping users bridge those gulfs sometimes means doing it in a way where I can kind of understand what you want me to do here. This is a round thing. It controls the temperature. It's a thermostat, and on an old thermostat, you would actually physically turn a dial to raise or lower the temperature. And now they have these very fancy electronic thermostats, Google enabled things. Do they have to be turned like this? No, they don't. They actually don't at all. It could be an up and down button. It could be just buttons on the screen. But we've created this so that we can actually help the user in their mind using a mental model they already have of, I turn the temperature up, I turn the temperature down. That's how I can interact with this device. It's the same thing. It's the shape that I'm used to. I have a conceptual model of what a thermostat should be, so I can turn it up and down. And that actually helps me to learn how to do this more easily. And it puts some constraints on here as well. I can only turn it in two directions. I can't go like this with it. So I know that this is the way to use this device based on a conceptual model. And sometimes this mental mapping goes a little beyond just the basic piece. If you've ever used a stove top, I love this example. No two stove tops are the same. You may go to a friend's house and you look at their stove. You look at a stove in a picture. If you go to a hotel's and there's a stove there, or in an apartment that you've never been in and there's a stove there, they always have the knobs in different places and the burners are there. And it's hard to know which knob is going to turn on which burner sometimes. Sometimes there are even little affordances, little pictures right next to the knob that say it turns on this one, and it shows you a bunch of circles and it shows you which of the burners that knob is going to turn on. Mapping plays a huge role where things happen. If I do this, something happens over here. And the placement, the geography of those things on a device matters a lot. You can even think about your own devices, your computer, your smart device. Where are the icons? Why did you put those icons there? Why are certain in the bottom and certain over in certain places? And you remember how to get to certain apps because you remember where you put that icon. And sometimes if you have a ton of different apps on your phone and you're swiping through 3 or 4 screens, it can be very difficult to even remember where some of them are because your mental map has become too big. So creating that mapping can be really, really important to help you have an easier time using a technology, keeping that mapping simple. And I mentioned constraints, but sometimes an affordance is a constraint. The idea that I could put puzzle pieces anywhere I want, but I can only put them together in certain ways because they only fit together certain ways. And even if they look like they might fit, sometimes they don't. I've created a constraint, a physical limitation that says, no, these pieces don't go together. You're trying to build a puzzle, and I've helped you understand that not all the pieces go together. If all the pieces in every puzzle all went together, you'd have a very hard time building the puzzle, even if you saw the finished product. So those constraints are very important. There's also semantic constraints. You walking backwards out a door can sometimes be very difficult if it's a pull, and sometimes it's like, well, the door doesn't open that way. If I back into it, I have to turn around and open it. It's constrained. It doesn't move in both directions. A cultural constraint, for example, this is not done in this place. You're not supposed to do something like that in this place. Therefore, I know that constraint tells me this is not one of the available allowable actions. I can't start changing my clothes in the middle of the street because I got them dirty. Well, no, it's a cultural constraint there that says you don't strip naked in the middle of the street. Therefore, to change these clothes, I have to go somewhere private, maybe go home, maybe go to a somewhere else and make sure that I've taken these off in a culturally appropriate place. There's a constraint there about how I use my clothes. Just another silly example. Users need your help. And I'm going to leave you with these thoughts about empathy and why users need your help. Donald Norman suggests you follow these rules. Really be nice to your users. They need things kept simple. They need that conceptual model. They need to understand how to follow a guide. They need to understand why. Give them some reasons why. It's helpful to understand why I need to do something to get me to do it. And it would be important to feel like I can control what's happening. Why is there an undo button on so many pieces of software? The undo button is there because you want to give them control. Oops, I made a mistake. Oh, I didn't need that. Click undo. Oh, I can take that back. And help them feel good about it. You're doing the right things. Sending really awful error messages to a user is a very bad idea. Helping them say, well, maybe you didn't mean to do this. Are you sure you want to close this browser window? You're going to lose everything. Are you sure you want to turn off this software? You're going to lose your place in the game. Okay, no, I didn't want to do that. Thanks for the reminder. You're reassuring me that I'm doing the right things. And it's funny, you can turn this around. And Norman created this as a joke about how the computer would think about interacting with the user instead of human computer interaction. This is computer human interaction. People have simple minds. Just talk down to them. They're pretty stupid. And they have this thing, humans need to understand something. So tell them stories that make it sound like they know what's going on. And people don't trust that you're telling them the right thing to do. So just make up some reasons why they should do things, and that way they'll make a decision. And of course, humor them. Let them think they're in control. Give them simple things to do. They won't realize they're not really in control. And of course, humans aren't very confident, right? So just keep telling them they're doing a good job, like you would like a little child. Oh, you're doing such a good job. These are jokes. This is not the way to do the five things I just mentioned. These are sort of the extreme level. And just avoid going in this direction because it really doesn't demonstrate much empathy for your users. We can feel helpless sometimes. Users can feel very helpless sometimes. And sometimes they don't have the mental models to figure things out. Sometimes they don't understand how to address their doubts and they just give up. They say, I can't do this. There are two kinds of helplessness. There's helplessness that I've done this over and over and over again, and I give up. I can't do it. And that's a sign of bad affordances. A user should be able to navigate after a couple of bad attempts how to actually do something. If they can't, they need to work on that design. Taught helplessness, on the other hand, you can overcome it by giving that reassurance because some people will say, oh, I, I've, I have a bad mind for technology, so I can't use this new technology, even though they've never tried. That reassurance can help a great deal. Well, it's not as hard as you think it is. Maybe just give it a try, see what it's like. And that taught helplessness, like I've been taught that I'm helpless, can be minimized if you can give them that reassurance. Learned helplessness means better affordances. Taught helplessness means more assurances. And it's really just critical that that empathy is there. Why do we need empathy? Why should we feel a connection to our users? If they have problems and you're just like, that's a stupid problem, you're never going to be able to help them with that problem. You have to understand who you're designing for and make sure that if you have assumptions that this is very easy, a child could do this, and then you go and put it in front of some adults and the adults can't do it, don't say, oh, they're stupid adults. Say, wait a minute. Maybe I have had some assumptions here about what a user can do, and they're wrong. And I need to better understand what is wrong here. What feels bad? You can see this all the time with older people when they try to use technology. Sometimes they have problems, and younger people may look at those problems and go, "Oh gosh, so stupid. They don't know how to use this. I don't know why they have these problems." Empathize a little bit. Maybe it's about problems you don't understand, and you need to test your assumptions about what's easy and what's not, so that you can create a better experience based on their needs and how they view things and their problems. So, compassion is important. Empathy is about putting yourself in the shoes of your user. It's more important to understand those users, again, so you don't build products that they don't want, they can't use. assumptions often contribute to a lack of understanding users. You may say, well, this is super easy, and your users don't feel that way. And one of the most important parts, one of the most important parts of user experience design is understanding your users, asking them questions to challenge all the assumptions you might make in your research, in your design. You want to get as much data as you can from your users, from your customers to improve the total user experience. And just ending on a little note here, this does not mean like, oh yes, your emotions are very important. I want to hear all of your emotions. I'm your counselor, I'm your therapist. Tell me, users, what are all your problems? Donald Norman actually doesn't like this. He actually says that he doesn't always believe in this sort of empathetic approach. He says, we're not mind readers. How could we possibly know everything that the users are thinking? We can't get into their heads. And there's millions of users out there, and some of them are going to be in different places and different cultures. And we don't have to understand everything about all of our users' problems, what they think and how they feel. What we do have to understand is, what are they trying to do? How do we make that possible for them? Is there a way that we can do it in a way that alleviates fear and eliminates errors and gives them a positive user experience with affordances that make it more intuitive or more straightforward for them to accomplish their goals? And then also listen to those problems, maybe not pander to their emotions, but listen to those problems to challenge our assumptions about what is good and what is not in our products. And so I'll leave you with a quote from Donald Norman. And this really sums up everything we've talked about tonight. And I sincerely appreciate your attention for this lecture. I hope that this was valuable for you. Human centered design means that we actually must go out and understand the real issues and what people's needs really are in order to design something. At the end of the day, creating great user experience design, creating affordances that help your users is about listening to them, understanding their problems, and using that information to build better products. Thanks so much, everyone. I really appreciate it. I think now we're going to move on to our question and answer session.
Thank you very much, Ray, for such a fantastic lecture and for sharing the insights of user experience design with the Ukrainian audience. We have some questions in our Q&A chat. I think you can read them by yourself. It will be more convenient for you, I think.
Absolutely, Olga. Thank you very much. And I'm just looking through the questions now. And I think a good question to start with is Maxim asked, what do you think is the next step in the stage of AI? And AI is just fascinating. I do a lot of work with artificial intelligence in my jobs. And we're seeing tremendous advances in how generative artificial intelligence can be used to solve problems. And there are some key things to consider when you're looking at AI and its value in user experience design. The knowledge base for artificial intelligence is critical. And I think the next stage of evolution for artificial intelligence is going to be where AI gets its information. How is it answering questions? Occasionally, you'll see AI and examples where questions are just answered very strangely. There was an incident a couple of months ago where ChatGPT suddenly started answering questions in English by putting little Spanish words in it. And in here we call that Spanglish sometimes, where you put Spanish words into English. And it was very strange for the users to see all of this. And sometimes that's called a hallucination. Where that comes from is the knowledge base. Where is the AI learning information from? And that's going to be the next stage. If we're going to create AI that helps people solve problems, helps us to design better products and experiences, we need to have that information from our users and customers. We need still to do that research where we ask questions about their problems and their needs. And we put that into AI so AI can give us the right solutions and understand what it is we're trying to do, especially if we know how to ask the right questions when we talk to an AI, which is a whole nother lecture we could offer in the future, probably. Um, let's see here. Psychological testing What do you think is important to consider in interface design? Online psychological testing as a product. Very interesting. I think when you're doing any sort of product that faces users with very specific needs, it needs to be tailored. And there are many ways you can do this. In fact, I gave a lecture a couple of maybe a year ago now about designing digital moments, persuasive digital moments. And I think that relates to this question, the idea that you can create user experiences that help the user to feel like there's an impact, like there's actually going to be something valuable here, that I can persuade the user to do certain things through certain techniques, like tailoring their experience or creating sort of a very strict constraints around something so they know they're moving down a process. Or I can create customization that helps the user feel like when they're going through a test, for example, that it's specifically for them and they're being treated with value here. So I think some of the ways you could design testing as a product go back to the idea of creating an impactful moment. And I would encourage you to go back and look at that recording on the UGF website about the power of digital moments. That might help with that answer. These are great questions. How do cultural factors affect the perception of service accessibility among different user groups? This is interesting as well. Certain services offered by products are prohibited by certain cultures. Um, for example, the People's Republic of China has very specific restrictions on what can be done through the internet. And that's cultural on their part. That's also legal on their part. And it's designed to not only protect certain information from the populace, but it also creates a perception among people that there are things they shouldn't have access to. Um, it's interesting, though, that accessibility is sometimes challenged. You'll have, for example, NYU, New York University, where I also teach, has a campus in Shanghai. And at that campus, there are ways that those individuals have access to a broader set of information from the internet than the average user in the People's Republic of China might. So that is an interesting juxtaposition to see that two different user groups have access to a service differently within the same culture. And again, it's based on cultural. Many of the Americans and others who are there in the People's Republic of China culturally feel they should have access to all of that information. So there's a tremendous interplay there between culture and usability and technology. And it's on a case by case basis. I have to say that cultural factors always have an impact, but it's very different. And it requires a cultural expert to really be able to answer those questions effectively, which is why you'll see designers hired in different countries when products are being developed in those countries. It can't just be a bunch of people sitting in Silicon Valley designing something for Europeans, because they will get a lot of things wrong based on a cultural misperception. This is an interesting one. How do emerging technologies such as augmented reality or voice interfaces impact the traditional understanding of affordances and user experience design? This is a very interesting question because for a long time, going back, 20 years in user experience design, we dreamt of a time that there was natural language processing, that you would have a voice interface. And now we do. What has that done? It's created a tremendous more affordances. It's created a rich set of affordances for using technology, not just for users like me who have full use of my faculties. Suppose I can't type. Suppose I can't do anything with my body and I can only use my voice to interact with the system. I've created a brand new set of affordances for a group of users that were previously disenfranchised. They could not achieve agency through any of the affordances that I would put in a product simply because of their physical abilities. You can see other examples of this with vision impaired individuals who use readers. One of the interesting things about social media is there are still hashtags on social media, and they are affordances to connect you with different posts based on topics. But if you're using a reader, a reading technology, because you can't see or you have very poor eyesight, and you're using that, those hashtags sound like nonsense because the words cannot be discerned. There's a type of hashtag called camel case because of the humps on a camel, where you put capital letters at the beginning of each word in that hashtag. So if someone who's vision impaired is using a reader to go through, it can actually tell the user what words are in that hashtag. So we're in an era now where emerging technologies such as technologies for navigating the internet, natural language processing are creating new affordances all the time for users that previously could not access certain information. And that's wonderful. And I encourage all of you who are looking at user experience design as a future to think about all of those populations of users with different abilities and not assume that there's a universal user who can stand and use both of their hands and read and write and hear everything, because there aren't. It's the same thing with graphics. Putting those graphics on the front of that shopping mall in Dnipro. What if I can't read the language? Well, I kind of now understand because you've given me an image that I can kind of understand. I don't understand all of it. I know I can't bring my dog or smoke cigarettes in this mall, but I wouldn't understand how to read that unless it was a graphic. So figuring out ways to create affordances that move the user beyond certain information that they can receive and giving them new information that really helps them understand. These are terrific. How do affordances differ in physical products versus digital interfaces? And what principles remain consistent across both domains? What a great question. So, physical affordances are often uh, tactile. What does that mean? A physical affordance is something that I can use my hands most of the time or my eyes most of the time to figure it out. So, for example, suppose I have a little remote control. And what is this? Okay, it's a box. It's a black box with a white thing on it. What do I do with this? Well, I can hold it in my hand, which means it's something I can move around with. That's interesting. And it, oh look, it has a clip on it. So this is a physical clip. This means, oh, I can attach it to something. So this is for traveling with. I'm supposed to take this somewhere. And then what is this? There's a white button on it. What happens when I press that white button? Oh, a little light turns on. Look at that. Wow. Okay. So something happens when I push this button. And if I'm near the gate, I'm thankfully not near the gate that this opens, but if I'm near the gate that this opens, I've discovered a lot of different uses of this device just by using my hands and my eyes and looking at it like this. It's tactile. With a digital interface, it's often a different set of senses. My eyes are important. The reactions of the interface are important. That's why you see links sometimes change color. That's why you see sometimes buttons are raised on an interface. Anything that can help me discern by looking at the digital aspect, or maybe there's a tone when I know I've done something, an error message, and a little bleep comes up, or I receive a chat message on my phone and I get potentially an alert appears that tells me, oh, that's an affordance. Someone's trying to get in touch with me. Or I hear a noise. Oh, okay, that's Facebook. Someone just sent me a Facebook message. So digital interfaces have a different set of affordances to help the user know what to do, because I don't have, in most cases, that tactile ability to hold the device and go, oh, I don't know what this is. Let me figure it out. Let me bridge the gulf of evaluation by playing with it. The digital device requires a different set of affordances, but they operate the same way. There are affordances in a door handle on a car. There are affordances when you turn on a shower. There are affordances simply when you're walking down the street. There's usually a place that you walk down the street and a place you're not supposed to walk down the street, and you can tell which one's which because of the affordances. So there's a lot of overlap. the tactile nature, I would say, is the key there. Let's see a few more questions here. Um, how can designers cultivate a mindset of empathy throughout the entire product development lifecycle? What a good question. And it's so critical. Now, Don Norman did say, I don't know if I can read the minds of users. And he's a wonderful researcher. He's kind of a grumpy old man now, but he's really kind of said, I can't understand all the emotions of everybody. How can I get my design team to be empathetic about everybody? Well, we already talked about the idea of getting out there and talking to your users and listening to them. We also can think about the idea of building personas. What is a persona? A persona is when you create a fictional character that represents a group of your users. They're not a real person. But suppose you're trying to work with users who are women between the ages of 25 and 35 and have kids. That's a lot to say. You could create a persona that says, this is Mary. And Mary is 27 years old and she lives in this city and she works at a software company and she has a 7-year-old girl. And she enjoys going out at night with her friends. She writes letters to her family in a different place, and when she likes to listen to certain kinds of music. And you create this fake person based off the data you've collected, the questions you've asked from your users. You collect all that data, you bring it into the workspace. You say, okay, here's what we know about this demographic, women between these ages who live in this place and work like this. Can we develop a fictional person and give them a name? Call them Mary and find a nice picture and have that be Mary's picture and put it there and put that out somewhere in the design area. So when you're thinking about designing for your users and you want to have empathy for what goes on in their lives, what their problems are, who they are, you can say, this is a problem. Well, who is this a problem for? Well, it's a problem for Mary. I mean, look, this is Mary, and Mary would have a problem with this. And it starts to create that empathy where you've thought about your users, but you've also humanized your users by building this fake person, this avatar, a persona is a great way to do that. I'd encourage you to go look online for more information about personas if you want to cultivate empathy during the complete life cycle with a design team. So it's a good way to do it. Let's see here. I like this. Can AI design important things without people in the future? What is my opinion? Well, it's a big question. I think there is concern that that is true. I think that AI leaders and scientists all over the world are saying that now. And why is there concern? We need technology that we can interact with and add the human touch, if you will. That's the whole point of tonight's lecture. The idea that there has to be a way for humans to feel they're in control of a technology, to use it effectively, to have a positive user experience. As soon as we don't have a user experience, as soon as AI is designing things without us, it changes what that means for user experience design. An AI right now can create a user experience today that you would enjoy, that you would find positive. You can Sora created something that scared everyone here in Hollywood. The idea of creating virtual movies and virtual sets and not even needing actors anymore. That's the reason why many of the actors and writers from Hollywood went on strike last year for many months and said, we don't want artificial intelligence taking our jobs away. Will artificial intelligence change jobs? Yes. Will people have to switch jobs because of AI in the next 10 to 15 years, next 5 years? Yes. However, we still need to be a part of that process. It's like it's like when the calculator was invented. People said, "Oh my God, humans are not going to be able to do math anymore." And we can, but it's a tool. this tool helps us do math better. Why? I'm bad at math. I just know I'm bad at math from years of getting it wrong. It's the gulf of evaluation. It's not taught helplessness, it's learned helplessness. I've done it over and over again. But just like individuals who said, we will no longer be able to do math, or because television came out, people will no longer go to the theater. It's just one more tool. So we have to be very careful that AI doesn't take that away from us. We still need to be a part of these processes. Even if AI is creating things for us, it should be one channel, but not take over all channels. That's my limited view of the answer to that question. It's a really wonderful question. Olga, am I missing? Maybe there's one more here, I think. What prohibitions?
Yeah, the last one.
Sure. What prohibitions exist in the use of design tools? This is interesting. I think I understand this question. Certain times design tools have very limited capabilities, and sometimes you need to find tools that will give you a better set of options. There are some tools out there that I would highly recommend that folks look at for design that are very flexible and in some cases free, that you can look at. First is a tool called Figma, Figma, Figma. And that is a free tool for creating prototypes. And you can do it in a very interesting and easy way so that you don't have to learn a lot of coding and a lot of software. This is one of the biggest things that prohibits design is people don't have the skills. Figma is a very easy one to use. Another you might consider for designing early concepts of designs, what we call wireframes or mapping out a design, is something called Balsamiq. That's Balsamiq, Balsamiq. And that lets you build actually very interesting, like a mobile device and put your design right in it, drag and drop very quickly. So the problems with design tools are often lacking the skills to know how to do things. So those are just two examples. Another one is called Canva, Canva. These are all great tools that you can get started with right now to design user experiences that require very little knowledge. They're fairly intuitive. And beyond that, there are tools that are prohibitive, but I would get started with those if you're interested in learning more about how to create your own user experiences.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ray, for such detailed answers. And we are very grateful for your contribution and for your time. And we're always looking forward to your lectures. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Good luck to you all on to victory.
Dear participants, thank you very much for your answer, for your questions, for your attention, and for your positive feedback. See you next week. Thank you very much.